Hieronymus Jones and the Teacup Squid, a YA coming-of-age fantasy romance novel filled with magic, humour, and tentacles. Written and narrated by Michael Palmer-Cryle. Chapter 3. The bell had rung to alert the school's denizens that lunch was upon them. A small, sandy-blonde first grader moped back to his classroom to return the bell he had just rung. A bell with a handle that you shake to make sound come out of. None of those new-fangled electric bells here. Gertrude shuffled quietly behind the rest of the class, trying desperately to spontaneously develop the ability to turn invisible. And failing. Had she asked Hieronymus for his help in that department, he may have been able to aid her, as he had a little experience in such matters. Upon returning to the classroom, it was discovered that several of the students' bags had been rifled through and were lying open on the ground. "My lunch is gone," Albert, call me Al, said in a whining, annoying kind of voice. As annoying as Albert's, call me Al's, voice was, it was quickly joined by several other similar cries. Hieronymus surveyed the scene and noticed that 6 bags were on the ground, his included. Well, 5 bags on the ground and one that was sitting on top of one of the ground-based bags. 6 bags total. Hieronymus walked over to his own bag that had not only been thrown down but clearly stomped on. Remnants of the soil from the culprit's shoe was still present. Hieronymus confirmed that his lunch had also been pilfered and looked at the 5 other victims standing nearby. He already knew who was to blame. He had known it after barely a second, known who the thief was, why the victims were chosen, and who the real victim in this affair would be. He just had to wait for Lucas to begin. "I demand justice. My lunch has been stolen, and I demand to know by who." Lucas wasted no time at all. Hieronymus knew what would come next, the accusation and then the attack. A smart person would have let somebody else make the extremely obvious connection, or at least waited 30 seconds before accusing Gertrude, but Lucas was not a smart person. Lucas Ballantyne was a fool. Not truly stupid, but no more intelligent than the average. He was very well trained, though. Trained in the way that those born to luxury often are. Trained in the correct way to speak. Trained in how to add that little flourish to his words to disguise the fact that those words had no strength behind them. Trained in the correct clothes to wear and shoes to buy. It must have been the new girl. Lucas was so proud of himself at that moment. Such a brilliant plan, foolproof, nothing could go wrong. So why was Hieronymus Jones smiling? I would never do that. Gertrude was shaking her head and backing away slightly. Her thick, wavy, impossibly red hair darted from side to side with the shaking of her head, revealing a little more of her eyes with every movement. Again, her eyes were fighting back tears. The class turned on her almost instantly. The L's led the charge, but others quickly joined in as soon as they smelled the blood in the water. Hieronymus hated many things, but nothing more than bullies. "I don't think so." Hieronymus carefully laid his bag on his desk, which was near the back of the room, where the students' bags were all hanging on hooks, all but the 6 on the ground. Well, 5 on the ground and one carefully placed on top of another. "Check her bag, then, Miss Cooper. I demand you check her bag immediately." With his annoyingly straight nose turned up and eyes closed, Lucas pointed at Gertrude's bag hanging by itself at the far end of the rack. "Curious that you are so certain which bag belongs to Gertrude, Lucas. Which bag belongs to Jeremy?" Hieronymus had chosen Jeremy at random. Lucas considered the people of this island to be beneath him. He didn't care what their school bags looked like, and he didn't know. "What about Shelley's bag?" "Sherelle's." "No matter. Shall we begin?" "Shut your face!" Lucas hissed. He was letting his true self out. He tries to hide this side of himself, but Hieronymus Jones always had a way of revealing your secrets, or worse, making you reveal them yourself. "The missing lunches are definitely in Gertrude's bag," Hieronymus began. His words made the colour drain from Gertrude's face. Even her freckles seemed paler. He could see the pain this statement had caused her, that he had caused her. It affected him more than he thought it would. "But she did not put them there." Hieronymus began to smile, very softly, when he saw that Gertrude's face now had something similar to hope on it. "Then who did?" asked Albert, call me Al, in a significantly less annoying tone of voice. "Lucas did. Sorry, wasn't that obvious?" Apparently not as obvious to the class as it was to Hieronymus, so he explained. "This is a childish attempt to frame Gertrude for something she clearly could not do. For what end, I cannot say. Possibly for no other reason than it is in Lucas's nature." The class listened intently. They didn't know why Hieronymus suspected Lucas, even though they were already certain he was right. He was always right. Gertrude has been with all of us from the time she first walked through that door to this very moment. She simply has not left our sight. She had no opportunity to steal anything." As the tall, pale boy with such an unusual mind spoke, Lucas became increasingly fearful, not of punishment, but of embarrassment, which was so much worse. In point of fact, the only person who could have possibly had the opportunity was Lucas, who, so politely, asked to be excused from our last lesson outside. "No, look, my lunch is gone too, and there are obviously no other lunches in here." Lucas held open his own bag for inspection, the same bag that was on top of the other, because he simply would not allow his belongings to touch the ground. It was empty, but for his books and the usual school-related items. "Not even you are stupid enough to put the food you stole into your own bag, and clearly you pretended you were also a victim to throw off suspicion. What did you bring for lunch today, Lucas?" Hieronymus waited a beat, then began talking again. "From the first day of class in grade 1 to this day, you have attended 19,857 days of school with me, and in that span you have never, ever brought a packed lunch with you to school. You buy your lunches. But I digress. There is no longer any person within these walls who believes for a second that you are the victim here." Hieronymus casually started walking over to Gertrude's bag still hanging on the rack. As he approached, he began. "You will notice the mud on the ground?" He pointed to a tiny amount of rich black mud beneath Gertrude's bag. "It also appears in several other places beneath the areas where the victims' bags were kept, as well as on my own. It was clearly tracked in by the culprit, since they are far too arrogant to ever bother wiping their feet. The mud is comprised primarily of black potting mix from the trampled garden bed." "So what? Anyone could have mud on their shoes. She could have wiped the mud there. She could have planted it." Ah, yes, Lucas was coming up with a plan B. Pretend Gertrude planted evidence to frame you? That is what you were thinking, yes? Hieronymus stared at Lucas, never breaking eye contact. He was one of very few people who would ever dare to do that. "Clearly you have forgotten that Gertrude still didn't have the opportunity. Only you did. However, if you require more evidence, I am happy to oblige." When Hieronymus spoke now, there was a darkness to his voice that was disconcerting. "Cookies." "Cookies?" It was Gertrude who spoke now, but it could have been anyone at all. Cookies was an immensely unusual thing to say. Indeed, cookies. Martin's cookies, to be precise. When Hieronymus said this, Lucas froze. "They are stolen, aren't they, Martin?" Martin nodded meekly. "Your mother makes them, doesn't she? Just for you? Only for you?" Martin's mother ran the bakery in town, a thriving business that nearly did not survive the death of Martin's father, but through the support and perseverance of both Martin and his mother, they kept the business alive. Martin worked there every weekend and most mornings. The bakery is known for its pastries and cookies, and unusual but delicious recipes that are in high demand. But not Martin's cookies. Nobody gets those but Martin. They are his favorite, and his mother makes them only for him. "With your permission, Gertrude?" Hieronymus held up her bag, and Gertrude nodded. She didn't understand, but for some reason, she trusted this strange pale boy. As Hieronymus opened Gertrude's bag and began taking out the stolen lunches that had clearly been placed there by Lucas, he held up the bag to the class, proving it was empty. "My cookies." Martin was distressed to see his cookies were not on the desk with the rest of the lunches. "Your mother makes them especially for you and only for you. We all know this. Nobody makes anything especially for Lucas. He has never eaten anything made with the same love as your mother puts into those cookies. Were that all, if he only wanted a taste of that level of affection, I would feel pity for him and nothing more. But that is not why he took them. He didn't want them for himself. He simply wanted you not to have them, for no other reason than he knew it would upset you. A creature like Lucas can only feel good when he is making somebody else miserable." "But there is some good news, Martin. He still has the cookies. He would keep them close, almost like a trophy. They will be in his pocket." All eyes shot to the pocket of Lucas Ballantyne and the hand that was within. The hand, that the class now realized, had not left that pocket for the entire time. "Show us what is in your pocket, please, Mr. Ballantyne." Miss Cooper had been silently watching, but would remain silent no longer. No, I don't have to show you anything. Do you have any idea who my father is?" "Well, do you?" Lucas was shouting now, and was so focused on the audacity of those that would dare to stand up to him, that he did not even notice Gertrude walk over to him. She walked confidently, no tears in her eyes this time. Gertrude grabbed Lucas's hand and pulled it from his pocket. He was still holding the small collection of cookies sealed in their plastic bag, secured with a shiny metallic blue twist tie. Lucas was speechless, but only briefly. He slapped Gertrude's hand away. "You think I care? What do you think will happen to me? Nothing, that's what. My father owns this town. He is the mayor. He owns all of you. What are you going to do about it, huh?" Lucas was storming towards Miss Cooper, pointing at her as he went, and the aging teacher was clearly uncertain of what to do next. Lucas had his advance halted by Hieronymus, who had stepped into his path. Hieronymus was now staring at Lucas directly into his pale blue eyes with his own deep brown ones. Hieronymus was hardly the physical type, clearly weaker than Lucas, the same height but lacking the muscle mass of the young thug. And yet Hieronymus stood there, confidently, with his head high and an almost imperceptible smile pulling the corners of his mouth, ever so slightly, upward. Why was he smiling? Why? "Enough, Lucas." The tone of Hieronymus's voice was so calm and melodic, Lucas backed down on instinct alone. The two had been in the same class since the first grade, yet Lucas only knew Hieronymus as that odd little weakling that sat in the corner and avoided everybody, off-putting and a know-it-all. Why had he chosen today to stand up and be seen? Hieronymus extended his hand, palm up, and simply said, "If you please." He kept staring straight into Lucas's eyes. Lucas could tell that Hieronymus Jones was calculating something. He didn't know what and had no interest in finding out. "Whatever." Lucas slapped the cookies into the waiting palm that Hieronymus offered, turned and stormed out of the room. Martin didn't look at Hieronymus when his cookies were returned to him. He just said thanks and went to eat with his friends. Hieronymus understood it was unfair to expect Martin to react any differently. He had been embarrassed, his personal affairs spread open for all to see. There was not a person in the world who would have done any differently. You keep your cards close to your vest in high school. You never tell people what you were really thinking, and certainly not what you were feeling. The other victims took their lunches from Gertrude's desk and headed out to the school grounds to eat their food and discuss the strange incident that had just occurred. Only 2 lunches were now left on the desk. Hieronymus recognized his sandwiches that were sealed in a Ziploc bag, featuring a smiley face drawn in Sharpie on the front. The smiley face had a tongue sticking out and 2 tiny devil horns, which made Hieronymus smile. And the last lunch was Gertrude's. It was an apple. I hope you enjoyed today's chapter of Hieronymus Jones and the Teacup Squid. If you did, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification icon so that you won't miss a single chapter. This book, as well as the other 3 volumes of the Hieronymus Jones series, is available from my website, www.voodoodelicious.com, as well as Amazon and iTunes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time.